Welcome back to another episode of the True Growth podcast. I am Latina Mata and I've missed you guys. Like I've not done a video podcast in a minute. So for those of you who are taking me in here via video, I'm so glad to have you. And of course, my regular podcast listeners on all the available streaming platforms. Well, hello. So today I want to talk to you about manifestation and I want to just debunk a specific thing. And I didn't even realize that this was a thing until some time ago, right? So I know that there's this high likely chance that you would have been taught or you learned that in order for you to manifest the things that you want in your life, like you need to keep your energy in check. Like you need to ensure that you're high vibe and you're in a vibrational match the things that you want and there's no room for negativity. And that is true, but simply to a point, right? So stick with me. So, of course, when it comes to your vibrations, your emotions, the things that you putting out into the atmosphere in order for you to attract it, it is based on the thoughts that you have, right? And those thoughts generally create feelings, and then those feelings basically create a specific vibration and then of frequency, and essentially that is what the universe hears. And because that is what the universe hears and that is what the universe gets from you, then essentially that's what you're going to get in return, right? And I believe that that is a really good foundation when it comes to, 101 law of attraction type of things. But when you realize, okay, so let's just say you first discovered law of attraction and you realize, oh my God, this thing works. Like you're paying attention to your emotions, you're paying attention to your thoughts, you're changing your mindset, you're working on your language, you're changing the way that you speak, etc. And you notice a shift in your life, right? You have gratitude, you notice a shift in your life. So that is all well and beautiful. But then you reach a junction where things seem as though it's going downhill. Things seem as though it's taking a left turn or whichever turn you feel, right? And you're like, what's going on here? But there has been a shift in your mindset. There has been a shift in your language. There has been a shift. And I just want to tell you, and I'm telling you from a place of fully being there and really coming to a place to understand what this shit is, right? Life is not linear. It is definitely not a straight line. So when you start your journey and you start engaging in the law of attraction type of things, or you become conscious because you're always manifesting things, right? But I mean, you become conscious of your manifestation. There is this belief to some degree that it could only go up from here. And anytime things go down, anytime there is a shift in your energy, there's a shift in life circumstances, money might be moving a different type of way, things may be seeming to happen that's appear negative. You start to question, hey, am I doing this thing properly? Like, what's going on here? And I want to tell you, it's because that is part of the process, right? When you are in that place of consciousness where you are aware of what it is you're attracting and what it is you're manifesting, and you feel expansive and abundant and grateful and just all of those things, there is this attachment and this appreciation for what it is you're doing, right? But then because life is not linear and because it's very cyclical, you are to expect, and not expect in terms of, like, okay, just waiting for the ball to drop or whatever, but you are to expect that just as there's going to be a season of abundance and harvest and, just reaping beautiful things, there is also going to be a time of low, right? There's also going to be low days. There are also going to be periods where things are not as beautiful and as grand as you expected it to be. And the myth around this is that you are only allowed, or you can only attract and manifest the things that you want when you feel high vibe and when you feel expansive. I want to let you know that that's bullshit. You do not have to be solely high vibe and full of energy and just all this gratitude and abundance and whatever to manifest the things that you want, because what that is essentially saying is that you can only get and have and be and do the things that you want when you are in a particular space, which means that you are actually placing conditions on your worthiness. You are placing conditions on your deservedness. You are placing conditions that you can only get something from God when you are good. which is not true, because you, just as you are worthy and deserving of every single thing that you want and need and desire in this world. It is not and should not be dependent on how you feel. So because what that teaching in terms of the manifestation, what at least what a lot of people are taught, and what I was actually taught, and I believed, because nobody told me this part, was that the things that I want and the things that I was attracting was as a result of me being in a high energy, high vibe state. And when life began to do its dip and it started to change its direction, there was so much confusion in my head, because I was like, but I'm doing all this shit. Like, my mindset has changed. I'm grateful. Like, my affirmations, like, there's been inner work, like I'm super conscious, like I'm aware, like what is happening in life, like what is this, what is going on with this. But there was this lack of understanding and appreciation that there is going to be the flip side of that experience. Now let me tell you what the story is, right? In that gap between the high vibe, expansive, abundant space, and then you find yourself in a low energy space, low vibration space, you're realizing that you are manifesting some things, but it's not things that you want. The belief that needs to come to your forefront, right, is what I mentioned previously, that your worthiness, your enoughness, your deservedness should not be conditional. Essentially, you you are enough even on the days that you don't feel as though you're enough. You are worthy even on the days that you do not feel as though you're worthy. So when you realize that it may be a low vibe in an energy period, you may realize that things are happening in a type of way that you do not want. The place of work, the work that you are being called to do, is to acknowledge that even though you feel a specific type of way, even though you feel as though you're not worthy, even though you feel as though you're not adding value, even though you feel as though, shit is just not working the way that it's supposed to, it doesn't take away from what you deserve. It does not take away from what you should be getting and should have in this world. It does not take away from that, right? So I want to put something else in perspective for you. Now, when you're in this beautiful, high vibe, expansive space, and you feel so abundant and you feel so blessed and you feel so great, you are essentially operating in your gift, right? You see that, you think about something, you put it out in the universe, it comes right back. You're like, you feel stretched, you feel wonderful, you want to give, you want to share, you want to love. You're operating in your gift. Now, of course, just like we have high vibe periods and high vibe days and all of that, we also have those days we don't feel good at all. We don't feel good at all. It's a shit show. Things are happening. Because life is cyclical, because life is not linear at all, and it has all these waves and all these things. What is happening in those days when you feel unworthy? When you feel as though you don't deserve something, when you feel as though you're not valuable, when you feel as though, you feel lack, you feel scarcity, you feel doubt, you feel fear, like you feel all these in inverted commas negative emotions, and you realize that you are attracting things that you do not want in your life, let me tell you what you are being called to do. Because in that space, as I mentioned, abundance, expansion, all of that, that is when you are functioning your gift. When you are feeling that low vibe energy, right? It's when you are actually in your shadow self, right? Your shadow self, meaning these are triggers, traumas, conditional responses, trauma responses. You are functioning from a space that you don't desire to function in. You know you're functioning from a place that is you would not describe as your best self. You are being called in that moment to pay attention, is not to do toxic positivity, because that's the next thing that people get caught up with, right? Because we're trying to honor the high vibe and, just keep it positive and whatever. People do this toxic positivity type of thing where they just bypass their emotions with affirmations and pretending as though it's okay and faking it till they make it, while they're inside, they're practically dying on the inside. We don't want to do that. We're not doing that, because that's not going to serve you either. We want that when you are actually in your shadowy self, and we'll call it that, meaning that you're not feeling your best, you're not feeling the most loving and stretching and abundant and all of those things, and you feel like shit, basically, we want to acknowledge that shadow. And you are actually being called, right? You are being called to do work, to do inner work around that. You are actually being called to do inner work around those feelings of scarcity and lack and, sadness and not being worthy and all those type of emotions. When you acknowledge, when you acknowledge that life is not the straight line, right? It's cyclical. It is definitely wave like. It's all sorts of things, but a straight line. You are then able to look at your current state, right? Your current energetic state, your current emotional state, and literally pay attention to the triggers, literally pay attention to the traumas, literally pay attention to things that are coming up for you because of whatever the situation is, and make a conscious decision to acknowledge that, hey, this here is calling me to look at the parts of me that need healing. This is calling me to address the parts of me that need healing. And when you sit with these emotions and you sit with these thoughts and these experiences and these feelings, and you acknowledge that, hey, there's some decluttering that needs to be done. There's some forgiveness that needs to be done. There is some shifts in perspective that needs to happen. It ultimately will take you from that, in inverted commas, low vibe energy state and bring you back, right? So imagine a circle, bring you back to this space of abundance and expansion, whatever. And in those shadowy moments, so let's just say it's a low time financially for you. So you experience lack, you experience scarcity, you experience, doubt, you experience frustration. The inner work that you are being called to do is to learn to trust, is to learn to have faith. And so those moments that feel low, it is necessary in life because it is helping you, one, to do the inner work so that you could bring yourself back to that abundant space, to that expansive space. So every time you go through that, in inverted commas, low vibe energy space, it is a call for you to do inner work to help you expand and to stretch and to make your manifesting, your positive manifesting abilities even more concretized, because in those low moments you have learned the very things that your shadowy self needed you to learn in order for you to come from shadowy to high vibe, fully expressed version of you. So let me put this in perspective. When you feel high vibe, full of life, or whatever the case is, life is going great. So this is an exercise I want you to do. When you feel high vibe and life is going great, I want you to find, like, what is a word that you will describe in terms of those times, right? So I'm going to use an example. Let's just say when you have money, life is going good, relationships are fine, you're thriving in school, business is thriving, whatever is going on. You're traveling, you're just feeling good about life. How do you feel? Do you feel confident? So let's use that. You're confident. So in that moment, you're just attracting all your beautiful things. And then, of course, because life is life, it has to make a circle. It has to do something else besides just going a straight line. And maybe you're going through a drought. Maybe right now things are low, money is not coming in, things are slow. Might just have a breakup. You get sick. Something is going on with you. Something is happening with you that's not allowing you to be in this high vibe energy space. So guess what? You may find yourself struggling with low self-esteem, low self-worth. You might feel as though, you don't have the confidence anymore to show up in a particular way. You might realize that, there's this shame and guilt and whatever. That's the shadowy part of you that's coming out. And so now I want you to identify what is the opposite emotion, the opposite feeling, the opposite thought processing that you would have when you don't feel confident. Most times you would notice it is the opposite of that expansive feeling that you usually have. And when it is you identify that, what it means is that it's actually calling you, right? It is you are being called to address those shadowy parts. And usually it's calling you to embody the opposite of the shadowy parts of you, right? And it means that you have to come to a place to recognize that although you may not have the finances that you want right now, although you may not be feeling as healthy as you want right now, that there is still abundance, there is still gratefulness, there is still confidence, there is still love, there is still worthiness, there is still value that exists in spite of your current situation. And when you are able to see that in spite of your situation, it ultimately starts to shift that energy and bring you back to that space of abundance and expression, fully expressed type of stuff, and you just feeling good about life, right? So if we said when life is good, you feel super confident and just on top of life, and when life isn't good, you feel very low and self-worth is questionable or whatever, you might feel very scarce, and you might feel there might be feelings of scarcity and lack, then you are being called to learn to trust. You are being called to see yourself worth in spite of, without conditions. You are being called to self-love. You are being called to do specific things. So your homework is for you to identify what emotions and experiences, specifically emotions and thoughts you have when you feel life is amazing, and what experiences and emotions you feel when life doesn't feel that great. And whatever experience you have or emotion that you have when life doesn't feel so great, I want you to identify what you're being called to do. And if it means that you are having a financial problem right now, and you know that when finances rule and you feel like a top, like hot girl, 10 out of 10 in the city, but when you have no money, you feel like, you know, two out of nothing. You like you don't even exist in the city. So it feels like no confidence, very like little self-worth, etc. What are you being called for? What are you being called into? The shadowy part of you is to help you identify the inner work that needs to be done. The shadowy parts of you is to help you identify the parts of you that still need healing. And when you're able to do that, you are able to give yourself more grace, give yourself more compassion, give yourself more understanding and patience. And of course, the baseline for any type of recovery is love and safety, right? So when you're able to create a safe space for you to see that, hey, it's okay. This is part of the process, and that you get to love yourself in spite of, you get to feel good about yourself in spite of, you get to bring yourself to a specific space in spite of what your external reality looks like, it then ultimately shifts you back. So that we made a circle, right? It ultimately shifts you back to that high vibe expressive space, and it makes it easier for you to go back to feeling good about life, right? So I'm saying all this to say that you are not in this manifestation type of situation, you are not expected to stay high vibe. So I want you to take that belief out of your head. I want you to stop beating up yourself if you notice that, we're in a period of full abundance. It felt like that. And now you're in a shit show. It feels as though you're a shit show. And you're like, how did you get here? It is part of life. It is part of the cycle. But what is going to support you from moving from the shit show back to that space of abundance and expression and expansion is to pay attention to what you're being called for in this shadowy time, in this time that feels very low energy for you. What are you being called into? So if you had an experience of lots of money, less life is being good to you, and then you're here in a drought period right now, but you feel scarcity, you feel lack, you feel frustration, you feel doubt, you feel fear, maybe you are being called to learn to trust. Maybe you are being called to find safety within yourself rather than external things. Maybe you are being called to find humility. Maybe you are being called into something. You are being called into to learning to forgive. You are being called into something, and so you are required to pay attention to that. And the moment you are able to start to pay attention to that shadowy part of yourself and just give it love and give it compassion and give it forgiveness and give it understanding and give it patience, the easier it is for you to get back to that space of high vibe and good energy. All right. So essentially, I wanted to debunk this myth that you always have to be in this high vibe place when it comes to manifestation. No, that is unrealistic. And a lot of people, myself included, have been on that train where I expected that, and where I thought I could only manifest things when I'm in this high vibe type of space. But that's not true, because if I believe that, then it means that I am placing conditions on my worthiness. I'm saying that I can only have something, I can only attract and be and have all the beautiful things that I want when I feel good about life. And the truth is, not every day I'm going to feel good about life. And I also was in a situation where when I got into that low vibe space where I didn't feel good about life, I basically chose to swim there, like just stay in that space and just be like, okay, well, there's what's going on. So like, there's what it is, instead of making a conscious decision to try to figure out, hey, what's going on here? What is my shadowy self trying to tell me here? What is the lesson that I need to learn from this space? And then embody that so that I could go back to my space of being high vibe. And then, of course, there's also the situation where it's a shit show, it's turning into a shit show, and then we just toxic positivity it away. You're not feeling okay, you're feeling like shit on the inside, and you just say, no, I got like, I am enough and I'm abundant and I'm da, da, da. And on the inside, there's no acknowledgement of the real emotion. There's no acknowledgement of your shadowy self. There's no love. There's no compassion. It's just this fake it till they make it thing while you are dying on the inside. And I am not an advocate for that either. So I hope that this conversation here helped you put some perspective in terms of this manifestation thing. You are not expected, like it is madness to expect. And as I said, I experienced this, right? So when I started to hit my low, I was confused. I was like, what the ass is this? Like, this can never be normal. I am missing something. What I was missing is that what I was missing was to release the belief that I was always supposed to be high vibe, good energy, life supposed to be good all the time. And acknowledge that there are seasons, acknowledge that life is a cycle, acknowledge that when I am in that low, I am being called to do more work around the parts of me that need healing. And when I acknowledge the work, and that was another thing that I was doing, when I acknowledge my shadowy parts and I started to do the work, what I am being called for, it was difficult for me to embody that for a period of time. So if I was in a feeling of lack and scarcity, and I know that I'm being called into trusting, I will trust for a couple of days, a couple, like however long. And then when I find like it's taking too long, I just go back into that energy of scarcity and lack, which is not making no sense. That's not making no sense at all. So I am here to tell you, if you are going through whatever you're going through and you're in that low period, step into figuring out what it is you're being called to and then make a decision to embody that. And I promise you, when you begin to embody whatever you're being called into, it is going to help you get back to that space of feeling high vibe and good energy. Remember, guys, the intention is not for you to be triggered. The intention is not for you to not have negative emotions. The intention is for when you have these emotions, when you have these experiences, that you find ways to react differently, for you to deal with it differently, to help you get back to your regulated, connected, loving space. All right. So I hope this episode resonated with you. Of course, I hope it shed some light for you. Definitely leave a review if it did. Share with your friends. Send me a DM if this podcast resonated, and I will talk with you soon. Love you so much. Bye bye.